Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's always a pleasure to rise in this House and speak on behalf of the fine constituents of Calgary, Midnapore, and on such an important issue that truly affects their tax dollars. Madam Speaker, I want you to take a moment and imagine a Lifetime movie. Imagine a Lifetime movie that includes the elements of identity theft, forged resumes, contractual theft, fraudulent contracting, and collusion. Well, Madam Speaker, you don't have to imagine this Lifetime movie because it actually exists. It is the ordeal behind ArriveCan. ArriveCan was created for the cost of $54 million. Experts have said that this app could have been created with simply $200,000 over a weekend, but instead $54 million, Madam Speaker, was spent on this app. And of that $54 million, $11.2 million, Madam Speaker, went to a company called GC Strategies, and $4.3 million, Madam Speaker, went to two companies called Kusie and Dalian. And I'll add that these companies actually have received $80.3 million from the federal government over a significant period of time. So it's very concerning that these companies would receive these large amounts of funding for this $54 million app. So originally, Madam Speaker, this was a issue that was brought to the Government Operations Committee last spring, and I will say, in fact, that the government tried to dismiss this. They tried to sort of write it off as nothing to see here, and our objective at that time, Madam Speaker, was just to try and get value for money for Canadians. But as we have found out, as it has become so much more than that, it's become a search for the truth. And this, of course, was broken by the Globe and Mail's Bill Curry when he broke the story of the RCMP investigating this CBSA contract, and GC Strategies, the group central to the creation of ArriveCan, being the central player in this scandal as well, Madam Speaker, which of course leads to a lot of concern. So the company which is at the center of this is a small company called Bottler, and they actually originally did some work for the Justice Department, but they were eventually reached out to by GC Strategies, by the company at the center of the ArriveCan scandal, to do a pilot for C-65, and it was relative to sexual misconduct. So the developer said that they were first approached by GC Strategies managing partner Kristen Firth via LinkedIn in late 2019, and Mr. Firth said that he was reaching out on behalf of his client, who later said was the CBSA's then director, Cameron McDonald. They said that they later discovered that they were shocked to discover that interacting with GC Strategies and Mr. McDonald for months, the funding for their software approved through an agency contract with another company, Madam Speaker, Dalian, without their knowledge. They said they had never heard of Dalian at that time, and they had never worked with Dalian employees. They said they later discovered that Kusie had submitted forms to the agency about their work experience without their knowledge or permission. For instance, one of the employees said a 2-month summer internship at Deloitte on her resume was inflated in an invoicing points form to say she had 51 months of experience working for an accounting firm. Years of experience was used in federal contracting to determine whether or not a contractor qualifies for the position. It was also used to calculate per diem rates. So the story starts there, Madam Speaker, but it doesn't end there. GC Strategies' Mr. Firth also told these two employees of this company that he could act as a broker to secure a contract with the agency. He also promised he could open doors for them to land contracts with other departments or have their software approved to use across the entire public service, which would be a substantial contract. He explained that he would do this for a fee that is contingent on successfully landing government contracts. This company went on to record conversations with Mr. Firth. Those recorded conversations show Mr. McDonald, director this company, Bottler, in February 2020, to please work with Mr. Firth and let Mr. Firth work his magic. The conversations also revealed that Mr. Firth described Mr. McDonald in November 2019 as a friend and said, "I've been with him his whole career in government." Mr. Firth referred to various senior public servants as friends. They said they were asked by Mr. Firth to start working on the project even though they had yet to sign a contract. So we get into the fraudulent contracting piece here. For months, the two employees said they repeatedly denied answers when they asked Mr. Firth for a contract so their legal team could review it. When called to appear last year before Government Operations Committee to answer questions related to ArriveCan, the topic of discussion today, Mr. Firth said his company had invoiced $44 million in federal contract work with more than 20 different departments over the last 2 years. He said his company had no standalone office and just 2 employees, himself and Darren Anthony. Neither of them perform IT work themselves. Instead, they hire subcontractors to do the work in exchange for a fee of between 15% and 30% of the contract values. You asked me for advice on the key question of why GC Strategies, as the government was struggling to determine why they had chosen GC Strategies, but Mr. McDonald himself said that they're still grappling with who selected GC Strategies. Mr. McDonald's email comments on suggested answers for the executives, the draft answers appeared aimed at convincing MPs that no single person was responsible for selecting GC Strategies, Madam Speaker, yet we know someone selected GC Strategies. Mr. McDonald's comment that we are all, he set up a meeting for Bottler with the Canada Revenue Agency, Correctional Services, Global Affairs, Shared Services Canada, Transport Canada, Treasury Board, and others in an effort to have the software approved as a government-wide project to all public servants. And this is the crux of the concern for myself and my Conservative colleagues, Madam Speaker, is that when we're talking about ArriveCan, it's a $54 million app, which, once again, we determined that experts say they could have done for $200,000. And here we have the company that received $11 million trying to arrange contracts across all of these other government departments. During this outreach, Mr. Firth introduced them to another consultant named Von Brennan, who Mr. Firth said had extensive government connections in Ottawa. Mr. Brennan recommended they send an email to the Deputy Prime Minister from one of the employees' email accounts. So in addition to the breadth of this fraud, Madam Speaker, we are actually concerned about the level at which individuals were implicated and were informed. The contract for Bottler to provide its services was not a direct contract between Bottler and the Border Services Agency. In fact, Bottler's company name was not mentioned at all, nor was GC Strategies. Instead, the agency relied on a contract with Dalian and Caradix. In separate contracting document between Dalian and GC Strategies, which is not a direct contract with the government, GC Strategies is listed as a subcontractor to Dalian, along with an independent contractor named Patrick Van Abima are listed as consultants. Unannounced to you, as Caradix and Dalian were brought in as a pass, they demanded 15% for doing so. CBSA were pleased at the overall pricing and threatened to pull the contract, Mr. Firth wrote in an email. Your cost plus 15% and 20% for Caradix, I need close to $500,000. I was not prepared to slow down the process and stop our first client from purchasing, so I removed myself from the equation completely and gave them a 15% discount, or excuse me, 15% cut, pardon me. Thank you. By September 2021, Ms. Dutt and Mr. Moore of Bottler had had enough and filed a former misconduct complaint via the September 27th, 2021 mail to Mr. Utano at the CBS agency official that they had been dealing with. And I'll add that this initial complaint was ignored, so they had to go on and do an additional complaint as well. They learned the original contract through which their services were obtained was through an existing contract for IT services. And like with ArriveCan, what we are talking about today, the border agency had turned into a general contract for IT services at its specific request, and through their research, they found Dalian was submitting invoices and revealing payment. So, in the words of Ms. Dutt, to summarize, this is something that affects every single Canadian, every single taxpayer dollar that is taken from very hardworking Canadians who are already struggling and given the contractors through improper means. And I think Canadians have a right to know what's going on with their hard-earned money, and that...
I'm sorry, the honourable's time is up. I actually gave her a few extra seconds there. Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. L'honorable...
The Honourable Member for Sanchez and Bega. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech. I have a question. As I said earlier, it's not because we're against the amendment that we don't agree with the report. We need to study this further, yes. We carried out this study. Generally speaking, if we speak more generally, what does she think about the fact that Canada is one of the least performant countries in the world when it comes to protecting travellers? ArriveCan is a scandal for travellers. They had to cancel, some had to cancel trips. Sometimes Air Canada said they wouldn't act on ArriveCan. There's just a general lack of protecting travellers in Canada. Canada is very far behind. What does you have to say about this?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. Yes, of course, there are many scandals with this government. This has harmed Canadian travellers today. We're talking about ArriveScam. This is truly the biggest scandal here today because it means that even if there were ArriveCan scandals there, we've heard from witnesses at the Government Operations Committee that many more scandals exist. Of course, for Canadian travellers, but also throughout the government with regards to government spending.
The Honourable Member Brandon Sears.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to thank my colleagues for their thorough analysis of the events that took place in ArriveScam and the unveiling of where this $54 million went to. And I'm just wondering if my colleague has anything else that she'd like to add to the detail that was there. I don't know if she could. That was pretty detailed that she just gave us. But I think that this is an exceptional scandal, and I agree with her that it is probably the biggest one that we've seen in a while. So can she just elaborate on that?
Calgary Midnapore.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you very much to my colleague for the question. And he is right. This is, and I said this the first day of witnesses, this is potentially the largest scandal that we have in the history of recent Canadian government for certain. I was very encouraged to hear the NDP member who spoke on this moments ago say that when he questioned his colleague as to the extent of his scandal, we believe within the Conservative caucus that it's very important to certainly have the discussion around what happened until the Auditor General report, but to hear my NDP colleague say that his colleague believes that it will seize us until the next election, I'm very encouraged by that. It tells me that members of this House and the government should as well recognize the depth and breadth of this scandal and the extent to which Canadians are affected, Madam Speaker.
Time for a brief question. The Honourable Member for Niagara Falls.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And quickly to my colleague, despite the faults with the ArriveCan app and its application, why is and then the $54 million and the scandals that we now find? Why is it that the government, in your mind, do you believe that?
I want to remind the member to address the questions and comments through the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Why is it that the government believes that there's still some value in retaining the ArriveCan app?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Midnapore has 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm actually shocked when I walk through airports and I see the ArriveScam signage still within the airport, because given the information which we have received, which a result of good investigation by the Conservative caucus as well as Bill Curry at the Globe and Mail, you would think that they would be in a pretty big hurry to conceal this, to wrap this up, to not sort of put it in the in the faces of Canadian voyagers to the point to the point of my colleague from the Bloc. So that's a very good question, and I think what ArriveCan does now is it serves as the flagship of scandal, of monetary scandal within this government, with fiscal scandal within this government, and it will go down in history as more than just a failed application, as the tip of the iceberg, as the canary in the coal mine of scandal and corruption within this government, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise